It says it's being live streamed.
Okay, I will just restate now that we are live streaming due to a technical difficulty known as operator error, that we are within, we've just opened our public hearing for the draft comprehensive plan and associated seeker review. And we are beginning our very first comment from a member of the public. And Sarah, please proceed.
Thank you. Good evening, Sarah Adams for Falls Street. I had some issues regarding the sort of process and notification. It wasn't even clear on the website about the fact that this was actually LEAF until you kind of went to the agenda. I mean, the announcement itself didn't even mention that. But what I really wanted to focus on was the fact that I feel that after the summer we've all been through, the weather we've all been through, that before a comprehensive plan is adopted, the village really needs to work on a stormwater management plan. We've personally experienced stormwater management issues that we've never had before. And I will say that even in the section under the East Main Street, which is where our property is located, there's no mention of the fact that actually it consists of 3 adjoining ponds and a stream that drain that entire area of the village. And we're experiencing all sorts of problems now. And so I know there's mention about stormwater management in the plan, but I think it's really become much more of an obvious issue for most village residents this summer. The 500-year storm is really kind of meaningless, I think we're beginning to realize. And I know that one of the goals of the comprehensive plan is to try to increase the density at least in certain areas of the village. And I feel that before we do that, we really should be looking at how we're going to manage stormwater, because increased density means more impermeable surfaces, roofs, drives, parking lots, whatever. And, there are sort of a lot of communities now are working with these sort of homegrown solutions, which have to do with water gardens. But things like that require some additional open space, some green space. So if we start increasing our density, we've got more runoff, and we have less area in which to deal with it. So that's my main comment about the plan. I would urge the village to look at particularly the city of Madison, Wisconsin, which has an amazing rainwater booklet. Their goal is like 1,000 gardens. So obviously we don't need anything like that, but and they have plans for like $100 garden, very affordable, and it's very much a homegrown kind of solution. So I think that's a very helpful, useful place to sort of start. And with all of the, meetings in Glasgow and everything else that's sort of going on, I feel like we really need to pay attention to what we're being told by people like E.O. Wilson, this world-renowned biologist, is saying, look, half of our open space needs to be saved and preserved if we are going to stand any chance of stopping what could be 1 million species, evaporating here in the next 20 years. So the other thing I would say is, I know there's a goal of 2040, I think, for 0 emissions for the village. As I understand that, that's the village government things that you have control over. And I would like to sort of just say, let's go for 2030. Come on. We may not make it, But, you know, these are this should be an aspirational goal. City of Ithaca is going for 2030. I think we could go for 2030. And I just feel like we really are on the tipping point of all of this, and the time has come. We can no longer push this stuff down the road, kick the can down the road. And for me, maintaining and preserving open space, green space for this village has just, the importance of that has just increased considerably. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Any other public comment? This is the time, this is the opportunity for comment from the public on the draft comprehensive plan and associated secret review. Couple of members of the public joining us via Zoom, just waiting to see if anyone wants to chime in. Yeah, Jerry.
Good evening, Jerry Kraus, 1080 Seneca Road. Since I'm here, I might as well say something. I guess first, thanks for all the hard work that's gone into this. It's obviously has been a huge task. I'll just put it that way. And it's all pretty thought-provoking. I guess one of my general questions or comments is what I'm seeing as an inherent conflict in our goals, having to try to maintain the character of the village and at the same time increase density and our population by some percent. I'm not sure what the goal is in terms of numbers in the population, but by some percent. That's a really hard balance. I'm not quite sure how that happens. I guess that's all in the details to be worked out. But I think to some extent, those are conflicting goals that I don't know there's a resolution to. So I guess that'll have to be worked out. So that was my first question. It's more of I guess a challenge that I'm sure you've thought about. My next comment has to do with, from what I've seen over the last 5 years or so, when it comes to zoning in general, I've seen about an 80% variance approval rate. So I guess my basic question is, if when we get into the details of the zoning ordinance itself, is one of the goals to reduce that to close to zero? If we're going to change the rules, then I would think there'd be less need to grant exceptions to the rules. It should be a very rare occurrence, I would think. So especially in light of we're going to be making some revisions. My third comment is, when I was looking through some things and I see Appendix E has the zoning details in it. And I don't see any reference to Article 2, which to me is probably the most substantive article in the whole zoning ordinance. It's non-conforming uses and structures. So I guess I'm curious what's happening with that. Has there been discussions on it? Is it getting eliminated somehow? I don't know how that could happen. So those are a few items that I had. So I don't know if there's a way to respond to that or not, but thanks again.
Thanks, Jerry. Any other comment from the public? See one or two other people. No hands raised as of yet. Yes, sir.
Just one comment. Given the fact that this pretty much all happened during the pandemic, and I think the sort of obvious turnout to this public hearing, either in person or via Zoom, is kind of indicative. I do feel that, I know there was a meeting sometime during the summer to try to explain the comprehensive plan. I don't know quite what the turnout was for that, but I feel as though maybe before this actually gets approved, there needs to be some more outreach on the part of the village, maybe set up some neighborhood by neighborhood kind of meetings to explain to people what, because I know the comprehensive plan is kind of broken up into various neighborhoods in terms of characteristics and all of that. I just feel like, going forward, things will go smoother and better if more people get brought on board earlier. Then we get into the whole zoning thing, and then suddenly people are like, well, I didn't know about this. I do think that aside from the whole stormwater issue, I think that the village could probably benefit by having some more, maybe smaller public meetings with residents. Because I just think with everything that's been going on, this is not on most people's radar. Thank you.
Any other public comment? This is also, I will remind everyone, this is also the public hearing for the seeker review portion of this, which we went over in our last meeting. So if there are any comments or questions about the seeker review portion, this would be the time as well. Sure.
Well, I looked at the seeker form and I didn't understand it at all. Had all these little references to, I guess, sections, but there was never any explanation of what those were or what they meant. So really, for the lay person, and I'm not exactly the lay person, but I'm not, involved in the process. I just didn't find that it was understandable. So again, I think in terms of, I know that the LEAF for the comprehensive plan is kind of like, well, it doesn't really, frankly, I don't think it really means a whole lot, because the comprehensive plan is a very kind of generalized, aspirational kind of thing, so you can't really say, well, there are all that many impacts. The impacts come with the zoning, and that's where, but it still would have been nice to have had some, at least summary or something, explanation for all of those references on the LEAF.
If I can, I think what you're seeing is references to part 1 of the plan, the document. So there is, you might have been looking at just part 2. There's a part 1 that we completed earlier on. It's a part we complete before giving notice to everyone that this is happening. And I think it's just kind of pointing back to that first part.
Right, but it's still, just looking at it online, it just didn't make any sense.
I agree, that's confusing without having the two to kind of go back and forth. Absolutely, thank you.
And I'll just add to what Ben said, because, and we've had conversations about this in open meeting as well as with our attorney. The way New York State structures these forms, they are not always overly relevant to every action that nevertheless requires that seeker be done. So because the comprehensive plan, as you said, Sarah, because the comprehensive plan doesn't actually do anything,
No, I understand.
it doesn't have the impact. So when we look at, say, a part 2 of seeker, we end up saying no to all of the relevant questions.
There are still those references.
And so the references are kind of the if, yes, then, and so we didn't belabor it.
It doesn't, it just doesn't,
Yeah, understood,
it's hard to understand.
understood. Any other public comments? Anyone in the wonderful world of Zoom other than Jerry? Although Jerry, you're certainly welcome to comment again if you'd like. Sigrid, did you want to say anything? Welcome. Any other public comment? Going once. Public hearing on the draft comprehensive plan and seeker review going twice. No hands raised, then I would entertain a motion to close our public hearing on the draft comprehensive plan and associated seeker review.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments from the board or conversation regarding the closure of the public hearing? Hearing none, then all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And Trustee Carver has joined us via Zoom. Welcome. I will take the opportunity just to comment on a couple of things, just because I can't help myself and I'd rather comment than not comment. Stormwater management. I completely and wholeheartedly agree about the importance of stormwater management. That is the reason why we've commissioned our engineering firm starting in 2017 to begin the necessary work. Where we may or may not disagree, because we haven't really discussed it, is whether that should in any way preclude moving forward with other items, such as the comprehensive plan. I tend to be someone who prefers to act concurrently rather than consecutively when it comes to projects. But I completely agree about the importance of it. Last week, or was it 2 weeks ago now, certainly brought it back into everyone's mind about how important it is. We actually have an on-site meeting on Wednesday to review the existing analysis that our engineering firm completed back at the end of 2019. Of course, everything was somewhat delayed in 2020. So that process continues to move forward. I am also, there is, of the funding that Tompkins County has decided to allocate from their ARPA funds, they're making available a pool of money to Tompkins County municipalities for various projects. They haven't figured out how they're going to distribute that yet. But I certainly, stormwater is specifically mentioned in there. So I think that's something, and Ann Corman, our rep on the county legislatures, on our meeting right now via Zoom. So that's certainly something we're going to be looking to try to tap into if we can. And then the only other comment I have is about the process. Jerry, you asked some questions kind of zoning specific. As you understand, those types of things will be addressed during the zoning revision itself, whereas the comprehensive plan is a guiding document. And I use this phrase in the best possible way, a hopes and dreams of the community document. The zoning, of course, is where the law actually resides, and so that will be its own process. And then Sarah, as far as turnout goes, it's one of the things this board always wrestles with. I will say that I was here, as were you, for the adoption of our first comprehensive plan. And you were one of only 2 people in the room that night as well. We have a large number of folks relative to that joining us remotely. So while I wish that everyone was as engaged in the community as they can be at times. I'm not sure that even knocking on every door would necessarily increase turnout. But I feel, and I applaud the Comprehensive Plan and Zoning Revision Committee for the amount of work that they did do in terms of the number of meetings that they held, the amount of outreach that they did do. The survey responses were greater in number than the first time around. So while I completely agree that I do wish that there were 700 people in this meeting instead of 7, I'm also aware of the limitations of waiting for something like that to occur. And so that's the only other comments I have. I don't know if any of the other board members want to opine before we move on.
I actually do want to say something. I think that really good points were raised by both Sarah, you and Jerry. And I think that when we reviewed the language, I'm seeing several places where stormwater management is mentioned. And I think that you both addressed that zoning is really the teeth behind what happens here. And so I'm so grateful that you put that on public record. Like, we need to be very careful what happens there and make sure that these words in section 3.91 that says, given that the village is anticipated to receive more frequent and more intense periods of rainfall due to climate change, stormwater management, poor drainage, and persistent localized flooding will need to be addressed, that's not just buried in section 3.91, but a serious focus of zoning. So I just wanted to express my gratitude for that being brought up, and also land use, of course, so that this doesn't become a nothing burger, but like really there's teeth behind these intents.
And that's a good point, and specifically the stormwater. We did receive, and I don't want to belabor it too much, but we did receive $125,000 from former Assembly Member Lifton's office to do some stormwater work. And we realized when everything came back, when the bids came back, that the old saying, a nickel isn't worth a dime anymore. The dollar doesn't stretch nearly as far as we thought. So to do the kinds of large scale stormwater work that is going to need to be done to really make a difference on the impacts of the kinds of storms we're getting is going to take grant money. And the reality is that every grant funding arm from the federal government to state, and even I believe the county, the way they will allocate it, they do want to see that the grant, the project for which you're applying for the money is supported by your comprehensive plan. So by including language in the comp plan about the importance of stormwater mitigation, we're actually putting ourselves in a better position to try to access some of those funds. And it is certainly a long time coming, and we can all wish that we had gotten started on that a lot sooner. And I wouldn't disagree with that at all, but at least we put ourselves in a position to hopefully press forward on that as the funding materializes.
I'll just say I have a very personal stake in how water moves around the village. So you can be sure that I'm thinking about it the way. My yard floods as well as probably anybody. But no, I would also applaud the committee's work. Remember when that committee was formed, that various benchmarking due dates were kind of set, seemed like forever in the future, and here we are. So at least 3 years of work now. People have been meeting with regularity. So thanks for that. And maybe we need to think about branding. Maybe comprehensive plan is not a very exciting term to bring people out to talk about. We need a new name for. I don't know if the state will allow that, though. I don't have any ideas on that.
If you've got ideas on how to rebrand zoning,
I'm invited to talk about a comprehensive plan. Vision of the future or something.
I'll just say I do appreciate all the feedback that we've heard throughout this whole process and tonight. And stormwater, just to touch on it, even though we've all touched on it, is absolutely a key piece of this. And I think especially, I mean, we talked about from the kind of project side of it, but right from the zoning piece as well, you know, how do we, if we have this, if there is a pressure on the village currently to have more density, more people want to live here, how do we wrestle with that? Kind of as Jerry was saying, how do we wrestle that with the character, but also with stormwater, as you were pointing out? I think it's a really important piece, and I think it goes towards, you know, as we're looking at residential, we have to be making sure that we're looking at the flood mapping and the wetland overlays that we already have in the zoning and making sure that they're appropriate for the influx that we're seeing and perceiving that's going to come to the village over time. So it's really important points that are being brought up, and certainly things that are on, I think, everyone's mind on the zoning piece of this.
Ben Carver from Zoomland, anything to add?
I mean, now that you've drawn attention to the back of the room, I suppose I will. Actually, I didn't chime in because I don't have much to add. The one thing I do want to reiterate is I think my gratitude to the committee and especially to Ben Darfler for doing so much in the way of outreach. I have been continuously impressed. It sounds like maybe not everyone got those messages, but certainly from where I was sitting, it seemed like a really incredible job. And I just want to say thank you for that. I think that's a really core piece of a community plan of any kind. And I'm really grateful for all of the work that went into that.
Thanks, Ben. So with that, our intention was to hold the public hearings tonight for both the draft comprehensive plan and the secret review. And then based on any comment we have tonight, we will evaluate whether there is the need or the desire on the part of this board to make any substantive changes to the draft plan. If that were to occur, we would certainly need another public hearing. If we choose to move forward with the draft comprehensive plan as it currently is written and presented, then we would consider adopting it at our December regular monthly meeting, which is, and do you have that date handy? I believe it's also the 7th or 8th.
That'd be the 13th, I imagine.
Or the 13th. So December the 13th, Monday the 13th is our next regular board meeting. As I say, we have received a number of comments ahead of tonight's public hearing via email. And then of course, comments made by folks tonight. And so again, if there are no substantive changes made to the draft comp plan, what has been presented to the public is what we will consider for adoption next month. If we end up making any significant changes, then of course the process will continue. So I want to thank everyone that came, thank everyone for attending. We have a full agenda, so please stick around if there's anything on the agenda that you are interested in. And again, to echo what everyone said, greatly appreciate the amount of work, the hundreds and hundreds of hours by the committee members. Appreciate the assistance of our consultant EDR and all of their work in getting us to this point. And we will take it up for consideration at our next month's meeting. With that, we have actually our first public comment period on any comment, for any comments from the public on any topic relevant to the village, whether comprehensive plan related or not. So I will take advantage of the fact that we have a much larger than normal audience, both in person and via Zoom, and open our privilege of the floor time to anyone who has any public comment. Yeah, Sarah.
One question, is this stormwater analysis or whatever that's been done, is that available online?
The question was, is the existing stormwater analysis that was completed in 2019, is it available online? I thought it was on the website, but I could be mistaken. It is public information and available. So if it's not online, we certainly will make sure it's put there.
I don't think it's on the website, but I will take a note to put it up there this week.
Yeah, because, I mean, I'm not saying that they didn't look at the whole east end of the village, but, nobody ever, I mean, there was was never any interaction that I know of with any individual property owners or anything. So maybe that's the next step, I'm not sure, because I haven't seen the, what's been done so far. But there's a major, there's major drainage that has to be considered as part of that part of town. It's not just three nice ponds. And I think that we, myself included, just really didn't fully appreciate the role that they play in terms of draining that whole area with the school, the fairgrounds, you name it. So I'll be happy to take a look at it.
I will say, and I'll say this not just to you, but to anyone who might hear this, we are very interested in individual residents supplying information on their own stormwater experiences. We have, so part of the analysis that you'll see is the topographic survey, the USGS underlying information, consultation with the school. There is some information supplied by a number of residents, but it was not kind of a door-to-door or even a survey based. One of the very, and this is something we have to figure out what to do about, and open to anyone's suggestion really. One of the really limiting factors, it's a problem, we'll call it a problem. One of the limiting factors, one of the problems we have with stormwater mitigation is taxpayer dollars and grant money can almost never be spent on private property. And so we're left with essentially right-of-way, culvert, ditch drainage type of management, where the process needs to grow. And I know this is where the town of Ulysses is planning a town-wide water study to include stormwater. The talks with the county when it comes time to applying for grant money, the coordination around municipal lines. And even though there may be private property owners on either side of the line, if the drainage can flow, you know what I'm getting at. That type of coordination needs to be much greater. The problem is that if, property A and property B perennially have water in their basement, trustee Hannon, to fix that specifically can't be done with taxpayer money or grant money. So we have to do the other bigger stuff. And that's where information from residents is very, very helpful, so that we can feed that into the larger pieces.
Right, and they're, never like sort of promoting something like rain gardens or something that individuals can do fairly inexpensively on their own property in coordination with whatever the municipality is.
Sure.
Probably the way to try.
Yeah.
To address it.
Yeah. No, I agree. Any other public comment? Questions? Looking for raised hands in the Zoom chat, but don't see any. Give it another few seconds. Any other public comment, questions? All right, then hearing none, I will move on to item number 5 on our agenda, which is reports from representatives of other boards. I do see Mary was
Thank you.
on. There's Mary. We have Mary and Ann. Did I just lose her? Oh, no, she's still there. These boxes keep shifting around the screen. Ann or Mary, whichever one of you would like to go first, please proceed.
I can go first. I usually make Mary go, but I'm ready this time. Let's see. I just wanted to first quick mention, somebody said about going carbon neutral, and the county's aggressive goal is 2030. And we're actually pretty hopeful that we can get there. We really actually think it's pretty realistic. So let's see, what other updates do I have for you? The one of the things that we have going on tomorrow night is a budget forum at 7 p.m. if anybody wants to tune in. We have completed our budget, and we're going to have a final vote coming up soon. But we have a budget forum for the public tomorrow night. And of course, you can submit your comments in writing. If you want to come and speak at the virtual forum tomorrow, you can request that from our county clerk, Kathy Covert. You can also go online to request that. If you want to speak in public, you can go to the legislature tomorrow at 7 p.m. And one of the things I wanted to mention, I've been trying to intersperse a few things along the last couple of months of what we're working on for the budget. But one of the things is we put in some money for an assessment for shared services having to do with municipal code officials. And I don't know if this was talked about in TCOG yet, but what it's for is just to see, as some other municipalities have done, some other counties have done around us, is to see if there's anything that can be done, for instance, shared training, shared expertise, some, shared staff, if there's something that could be done for that as far as shared services. And let's see, the community recovery funds that was mentioned earlier too. So we have an RFP, so a request for, oh my God, RFP, request for proposals to manage our funds. And so that what that would be is we are allocating, it was going to be 7 million, but we used some of them in our budget for a couple of things. So we have 6.5 million. So we put our ARPA funds into our capital program. So that's why we're calling it community recovery funds, because it's not directly ARPA funds. We don't have the parameters yet. Our request for proposals is out. The deadline for that is November 22nd. So we'll be hearing back. And so then they're going to help us figure out what are the eligibility requirements and how you apply. And then what's the timeline for application and the distribution of the funds and all of that. So we will keep you posted on that. As far as COVID goes, probably everybody here knows, it's been in the news a lot. 5 to 11-year-olds are now eligible to be vaccinated. And it's the Tompkins County Health Department doing that directly at the mall. And it was Friday, Saturday, we had 1,200 youngsters vaccinated. And this Friday, Saturday, we're hoping to get 1,600 doses and to get 1,600 kids vaccinated. And if those dosages come in, which we think they will, or we're hoping they will, then that will be about halfway through that age population. So some people had asked us various questions, including could we do a registry? But having it go so quickly, we're hoping that maybe by Thanksgiving, all the kids or all the families that are wanting vaccinations for that age group will be able to get vaccinated. And some people have asked about kids with either some type of special need or a medical condition that you can go to a pediatrician. Most pediatricians locally have vaccinations available. If you're wanting to try and get in sooner, then the county is able to get through the population. Some people are calling up the pharmacies, and some pharmacies have it. I don't have a list here, but some pharmacies have vaccinations for that age group too. So some people are able to get in there. Let's see, the last thing is the COVID update. We have 11 new cases overnight, 123 known cases, 4 people are hospitalized right now. And unfortunately, in the last week, we had 1 more person pass away due to COVID. So that's 38 total. Even though our cases are going down, we are still have an advisory for people to wear masks when you're out in public inside. And especially with the holiday seasons or the holidays coming up, that's when we often have an uptick in cases. And I know I just went to a family gathering and it was really hard. I tried to wear a mask most of the time, and I was the only one out of 20 of my family members who was attempting to wear a mask at all. So I know it's hard. There's a lot of pressure out there, but please stay vigilant. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Ann? All right, thank you very much, Ann.
You're welcome.
Mary. You're still muted, Mary.
Thank you. We've only had one board meeting since my last report. And that was on the 26th of October. And at that meeting, we passed the budget for 2022. Overall, the budget reflects a 2.53% tax levy increase. And that increase broken down because we have two different tax rates. We have a tax rate for the townwide, and then a tax rate for the town outside the village, and that reflects that certain services are provided by the village that are not provided outside of the village. Anyway, it was a 3.5% increase for the village, which to put in a sort of, to give you a picture, it's an $8 increase or $9 increase from the 2021 on a median house valued at $216,000 inside the village. Outside the village, it was a 1.5% increase in tax levy, and that would be 57. That'd be like a $9 increase, but on a larger number. So that would be $565 for on a median assessed value house for 2022. Apart from that, we at our last meeting, we approved the Camp Barton intermunicipal memorandum of understanding, which it looks like I don't know if you're doing that tonight.
Yes.
At this meeting.
Yes.
So yes, we enthusiastically approved that memo. And then the other thing is that we are looking for a deputy clerk because Sarah Koski, who has served for many years, has stepped down. And so it's a part-time job. And if you know anybody who is looking for a job like that, please send them to the town. And that's about all I have.
Thank you. Any comments or questions for Mary?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Mary.
Can I just say two more things I forgot?
Sure.
Sorry about that. Our current tax rate that we're looking at is the increase is 0% at the county level. If, of course, your assessment went up, you will see a slight increase. So the current tax from the county on a median priced home of $205,000 is $1,250, and that would stay the same. And let's see, the other thing I wanted to mention is that we passed a resolution for municipalities that if they did a Bridge New York project and took that on, which we're always happy the town of Ulysses is doing one right now, is we passed a resolution to make sure that you get reimbursed from the county, because that has been talked about that, depending on this or that, would we reimburse municipalities? And we are really appreciative of the municipalities taking on these projects. We know it's a ton of work and a ton of time and extra expense on your end. And we really want to see more bridges while the money is still available get rebuilt. It'll make us all a lot safer. So we passed a resolution ensuring that you're going to get reimbursed. And that's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Ann. Appreciate it. If there are no questions or comments for Ann or Mary from this board, I will move on to item number 6 on our agenda, which is our consent agenda, which contains our meeting minutes from September the 13th and October the 18th, as well as our abstract of claims. I will, for the record, read through what the abstract contains for this month. We have a general fund abstract in the amount of $239,701.71. We have a EMS billing abstract in the amount of $18,540.32. Water fund abstract, $22,327.15. Sewer fund abstract, $13,155.68. And the trust and agency abstract totaling $27,966.32. So I would entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Questions?
Just to point out quickly that I sent some quick edits to Tammy, but she should be aware of them just for the minutes.
Okay.
I actually just fixed them all, Ben, so they should be good to go.
Okay. Does anyone want to first?
Ben Carver, Tom Myers is planning to take his leave of us unless you had any questions for him this evening. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Tom.
So we have a motion on the table to adopt the consent agenda as presented. Any additional questions or comments? If not, then all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Item number 7 on our agenda is board member reports, starting with myself. I do want to take the opportunity, as Thursday is Veterans Day, to publicly thank everyone, far and wide, but particularly residents of the village of Trumansburg who at any time in their lives, present or past, have served in our armed forces. Thank you all for your service. It is a debt that can never be repaid. I would like to announce that we have a vacancy on our ZBA. Scott Sheevely, who has served on the Zoning Board of Appeals for, I believe, 15 years, has tendered his resignation effective at the end of the year. So I believe, I don't know if ZBA has another meeting this year. I want to thank Scott for his many years of volunteer service on the ZBA, particularly over the last several, where there were a number of issues that came before that board that had more attention than perhaps others in the past. But that does leave an opening essentially effective January 1. So if anyone within the sound of my voice, live or recorded, is interested in serving on that board, please let me know. This selection is mine until our April meeting. at which time reappointments annually have to be approved by this board. So we will, historically, we have not had a long list of people wanting to serve on these boards. I would love to have more than a handful to choose from. So if anyone is interested, please reach out either to me or to another member of the village board and let us know of your interest. If you're marginally interested, but are understandably fearful of jumping into that kind of work, ask questions, reach out to us, see what's really involved. As we were talking about earlier during the public hearing, we encourage public participation as much as we can, but we're certainly not going to, don't have the ability to force anyone into these roles. So we'd certainly be appreciative of anyone who is interested.
Vernon, can I point out if I'm correct that the ZBA only meets if it has business,
That's correct.
which
So-
means that it only gets together if there's something fun to talk about. So I always pretend people are listening to our live stream too, but I think if you're considering joining any board, it's an active one.
Yeah, the ZBA, for those who are not familiar, is what the law refers to as a quasi judicial body. It is autonomous in the sense that their job is to hear issues related to the zoning that come before their attention and adjudicate them accordingly. So as Jessica said, if there are no such requests or appeals, then that board won't meet. I'm hesitant to ever say that they don't meet often, so you should join, because once upon a time, I was told this was just one meeting a month. But it can certainly be a busy board. Other times it can be rather quiet. So if anyone is interested, please reach out. The next item I have is in the Dropbox. It is titled, let's see, in the Dropbox, it's 783 EMS Task Force Resolution. I'm hoping that Mary will also have this come up on their agenda, I believe tomorrow at their town board meeting. Had a conversation, or there have been conversations with State Senator Hinchy's office. She authored a piece of legislation last spring that was eventually adopted by both the Senate and the Assembly, and was sent to not be signed, shall we say, by the former governor. There was no expectation that he would sign it. But now that we have a new governor, there is some hope that she might sign it. The piece of legislation specifically and only would establish a statewide committee to study rural EMS and ambulance services. So specifically not the New York City metro area or Long Island. It's Senator Hinchy's hope, in the conversations with her office last week, it's their hope that this will begin the process of looking at ambulance and EMS as a needed service, and what are the needs of upstate New York, what is available, what is provided, whatever is provided, how is it provided, what are the challenges and shortcomings, et cetera. The committee itself would be appointed by, I forget if there's 12 or 16 people on the committee, but there would be a number of seats appointed from each, from the governor's office, State Department of Health, the Assembly, the Senate. Everyone would have some appointing power. So what has come since is that the Governor Hochul will decide by the end of the year which of the apparently numerous bills that are sitting on her desk, having remained unsigned by the former governor, which of them she will consider signing. This one seems like it has a chance, and it sounds like, based on recess breaks and the holidays and so on, that she will make this determination probably in the first or second week of December. So what Senator Hinchy's office has indicated through individual conversations with them, as well as through TCOG, is that any municipalities that want to go on record via a resolution supporting the governor signing this bill could be helpful. So I'll just very quickly read the resolution that's in the Dropbox. It says, whereas the Village of Trumansburg Board of Trustees recognizes that ambulance services provide critical emergency health care, particularly in rural communities. And whereas the Village of Trumansburg Board of Trustees understands that rural ambulance departments are under unprecedented financial stress, which is causing many rural services to close, which forces others to take on ever larger service areas, which negatively impacts response times and the overall service provided to residents. And whereas these pressures on the availability of ambulance services creates issues with the equitable distribution of emergency health care that disproportionately affects low-income and disadvantaged communities in remote areas of New York State. And whereas the Village of Trumansburg EMS department budget has increased by more than 40% in the past 5 years, causing a regressive tax burden on low-income households. And whereas the foregoing issues are shared by rural municipalities and EMS ambulance departments throughout New York State, now therefore be it resolved that the Village of Trumansburg requests that the Honorable Kathy Hochul, Governor of the State of New York, sign pending legislation establishing the New York State Rural Ambulance Task Force, Senate Bill S3503C, and be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution, accompanied by a letter from the village, be sent to Governor Hochul, Senator Hinchey, Senator Helming, Senator Oberacker, Senator O'Mara, and Assemblymember Kellis. And I would so move if I can have a second.
Second.
Any comments or questions?
Typo? Is it?
Yeah, there's a couple.
Do you want to address them?
I can have them, I can hit F7 and have those proofread.
So I'm
Okay,
just I'm
so-
curious. This was kind of held up by the previous governor.
Yeah, it was understood that the previous governor was never going to sign it. Because specifically reading between the lines, but there were state assembly folks who specifically said that Governor Cuomo would never sign it because it specifically benefited smaller municipalities. Now that that has changed, there's at least the hope that that it might see the light.
That was going to be my question. Why was he against it? Going on with the
I think it's more complicated than what I just said. But that was certainly part of it. The other part of it is Albany has consistently, to this point anyway, as a whole, and specifically Governor Cuomo, former Governor Cuomo, has believed that that emergency services are best left managed by the counties. And so whether it's law enforcement, fire, which is mandated protection, and if there was a shortcoming, that's why, for instance, Tompkins County has especially compared to other counties, has a robust Department of Emergency Response. Those responsibilities, if local municipalities couldn't do it, Albany's position was that, or the former governor's position was that the counties needed to figure out how to make it happen. The reality is obviously something completely different. It's also my understanding, and again, I'm reading between the lines, and Ben Carver, you might have some different or other insight. My sense in talking to a legislative aide from Senator Hinchey's office last week is that she's not in any way opposed to this. It's that she's just got a mountain of paper on her desk that was left for her to catch up on or catch up with or not. And she's attempting to kind of crawl through what's a priority and what's not, having this type of political ask from various parts of the state is helpful. Ben, I don't know if you had any additional thoughts or answers.
I mean, I think that sums it up really pretty well. The one thing I would add is that this is historically was a federal issue, like, 60s, 70s until kind of the 90s, it tapered off. So it's one of those issues that the state can easily push blame up or down. So I think for Cuomo, it was just a really easy football to pass. But yeah, really very hopeful that this will go through.
Any other thoughts besides the typos?
Nope, made all the comments.
love it, necessary,
Yeah, thanks.
why did it take so long, et cetera, et cetera.
All right, then with a motion and a second on the table, all in favor of adopting this resolution and passing it along, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
The problem is Zoom is you can see your rating just falling between your eyes. Those are two swears.
Well, and it's funny that if they're not on video, you can't see them. So the people who are off video, we can't see. But you can see.
Yeah, there's a couple of two. Yeah, you can tell when the
That-
you can tell when the interesting topics have been
Nice.
concluded.
That makes us feel better.
Um,
Oh, I don't know.
New setting. Now you can see who's video on.
Last thing under my report is Mary had mentioned there is a draft MOU in the Dropbox. This one I will not read all of because there are lots and lots of words. But essentially, as we had discussed last month, we continue to move forward with what I'll call the preliminary makings, bless you, the preliminary makings of a possible, how many other, what's the word for variables? The preliminary makings of a possible coalition to potentially save Camp Barton from being sold in its entirety. At this current time, it appears that the Baden-Powell Council, which owns Camp Barton, at their meeting at the end of last month, they agreed to, they have a soft offer to sell a portion of the camp at the top of the hill along Route 89. They would like to sell, although they don't have an offer on it, they would like to sell an approximately 6-acre small piece of lakefront. They may need to sell an additional 5 acres along with that in order to give whoever the purchaser of that piece is enough room to put in a septic because of its proximity to the lake. But even if that's 6 + 5 is 11 and the 39 at the top, even if they sell 50 acres in those two spots, that will leave about 90 acres of the core portion of the camp, including many hundreds of feet of lakefront, the main camp land itself, the lodge, the woods, Frontenac Falls, the creek, and so on. And the council did approve giving up to 3 years for a couple of their active members to work with interested parties, including local municipalities, and possibly figuring out a way to preserve that in public hands.
That's great.
The next step is Caitlin Olson, Rich Goldman, and myself, along with Deb Nocky from the town of Covert, are putting together a draft letter to be sent to Governor Hochul. This is why she's so busy. Everyone is trying to take advantage of a friendly face for the first time in a long time in Albany, to ask that she allocate emergency funds for the purchase of the property. The idea being that if the state buys the property, there is precedent from other parts of the state where either DEC or Parks or some other state agency has purchased land to preserve it and then contracted with the local municipality to manage it. That's the hope. All it takes is a little bit of time and a few $1 million. And so that letter will be ready to go out in the next week, I hope. This MOU is basically the outlines of this coalition consisting of the town of Covert, Ulysses, and the village. And it doesn't commit us to any money at this point, but it does, hopefully you've had a chance to read it. It does suggest that we are willing partners in this coalition to work together to find, I won't say by any means necessary, but by as acceptable means as is possible to preserve the Camp Barton property for the purpose of future recreation and public use. If the question comes up, and I've spoken with Assembly Member Kellis about this, if the question comes up about what is Ulysses and the village's stake in the game, what is our interest, given that Camp Barton lies entirely in the town of Covert, the answer is through the Ulysses Trumansburg Recreation Program, we have the ability to administer the types of programs that we would like to see happen there, including additional summer rec, public use, park use, that kind of thing. It's a nice area. It could be used if we want to talk about down the road, if we have the opportunity to talk about revenue generation. It certainly can serve as a destination site for small events, weddings, and those kinds of things. So before I suggest, well, I guess at this point, I would entertain a motion, and then we can discuss it further. I would entertain a motion to adopt this memorandum of understanding between the two towns and the village for the purposes I've outlined.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any Comments or questions on the MOU itself? As I say, lots and lots of words, but
That's great.
Yeah, I know this, I mean, we've seen the conversation all over about wanting to preserve this space, so it sounds fantastic that we've got time and interest in trying to sort how that might look.
any other questions or comments?
I think this is before, are we even able to give money to something like this? It's a gray area, right?
The way municipal money would work is through the rec program. So if, for instance, in one version of this is, if the state is convinced to buy it, it either holds it, wouldn't be DEC, it would probably be parks, and holds it as a quote state park. But Taganic doesn't manage it. They contract with, in this case, the town of Covet to be the municipal managing entity. Then Covet could in turn contract with Ulysses Rec Program, for instance. They could contract with the Boy Scouts, if the Boy Scouts want to use it X number of weekends a year. So they would have the ability to contract with other entities to help manage the property. And that's kind of that's as far as we've gotten with how it would actually work logistically. There is the possibility, which has only come up in conversation, hasn't gotten any further than that level. There is the possibility that the town of Covet could, in theory, join with Ulysses and the village of Trumansburg in our rec program. That would commit them to annual funding. They certainly have a large number, really, of residents who take advantage of the recreation program. Kids come this way. So that would then tie us a little bit even closer to that piece of property. But that's kind of the devil in the details. The big hurdle that we cannot participate in overcoming directly is buying the property. There's no way that any of the three municipalities have either the wherewithal or the stomach or both to bond out that kind of money to buy a piece of vacant property at this point. No other questions or comments? Then with a motion and second on the floor, all in favor of adopting this MOU as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Fantastic. That's it for me. And I will turn it over to, notice the initials that were added tonight: Fire, TACC, ETC, and CWIO.
Excellent.
Getting close to my number of things here. I don't know.
You can win. Do you want some more of mine, just to seal the deal? Okay.
Sorry, I retract my statement.
Yeah. Okay, so what do I most want to tell you about? Let's go in order. So fire. I have to flip to my notes and I'll give you the calls, but I want to point out, and it's up on the village website, that they are doing a fundraiser for, it's commonly known as the Jaws of Life, but that's actually a trade name. So, but it's the rescue equipment that you extract someone from an automotive accident, and it's very expensive, and the fire company needs one. So the fire company is hosting a drive-through breakfast on December 4th, which is also Winterfest. And that will be from 7 to 11 and or till gone. It'll be breakfast sandwiches. So they're at the fire department. They are also embarking into, you may see coming into your mail on a fundraising campaign. Again, the fire company, not the fire department, for these tools. And so there's information out there. You might also see it at your local eateries and drinking establishments. There's a card, and they've done a really great job. There's a QR code that you can scan and then donate immediately, any amount. So look for that. And then we should note, let's see, for the past month of October, the village had 13 calls, the town 12, Covert 3, Hector 1, and Mutual Aid 3. I always like to point out that the 13 calls within the village represented 13.9 hours, but the 12 calls in the town represented 31.22 hours, so more than double the hours to do less calls. Year-to-date hours, 1,820. Year-to-date calls, 2,247. Continue to have outstanding reports on training hours. I think really the fundraising thing is what's most important. So come out and support them. for fire. Any questions about fire? Great. Trumansburg Area Chamber of Commerce. I don't actually have much to
I'm sorry,
update.
what's the fundraising goal?
The fundraising goal is like 165,000, I think, something like that. Don't quote me, but something in that area. But that's a good question. So I'm going to take a note to get a clearer answer on that. And I can email you if you're curious.
I didn't know, maybe it's on the literature.
I'm not sure that, because often they don't, fundraisers don't mention the grand total, but it's something on that level. It's certainly not within their fire company's assets, nor is it within necessarily the village budget. And I think a great nod that the fire company is so engaged as a volunteer organization to take it upon themselves to raise the money for this important piece of equipment, which services a wide area and not just the village. In fact, probably mostly not directly in the village if we think about where those accidents happen. Trumansburg Area Chamber of Commerce is continuing to move forward, continuing to build a really strong base, growing membership. And so stay tuned for more to come from them. On the ETC front, so the Events and Tourism Committee, Winterfest is the hot topic. There is a link on our webpage to the Winterfest Facebook page, which is where you will see, once it is solidified, the order of events. So it is December 4th, that Saturday. It is 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock. There has been a change from some time where it was later in the evening because downtown stakeholders suggested it. They said that the daytime hours were less visited, and the hope and the intention is not only will it be less burdensome for a pandemic staff to be there from 2 to 5, but also will encourage people to stay and go to more of the area businesses after the event ends. So when it goes to 7 o'clock, but you've already been in and the scenes where you can go at that time are already packed, it's less conducive to actually staying and partaking of all that is offered. So we'll see about all that, and welcome to feedback. Big thanks to Cynthia Menino and Jen Demarest, Karen Powers, and everyone who's helping with Winterfest. And if you wish your name was mentioned, please contact Cynthia or myself at the Village ETC on the website and email that you're interested, especially if you just want to be boots on the street putting things up. So there will be some special guests emceeing that may or may not be in this room, and not me or Ben Darfler for the day of. It's going to be a great event. Santa will be there and Mrs. Claus. And he'll be, again, stay tuned and look at the Facebook page for all of that. There's also going to be a Spirit of Tompkins County photo. So that's a project people could check out. spiritoftompkins.com, and it's sort of just taking group photos of cool things happening, which was also an impetus in Tompkins County, an impetus to have it in daylight hours. Remembering that we just fell back, right? So the sunset is something like 5:12. So the lights will still be pretty.
It only feels like 4:12.
Yeah, right. And there's, again, they're doing radio posts. They're really pulled it together. It's a fantastic committee of folks doing that this year. Is there any questions about ETC?
I would just pass on some feedback from your neighborhood police chief. Just wanted to mention that the earlier time will probably need more traffic need to be diverted. This is
Sure, yeah.
Because it's 2 hours earlier in the day.
Yeah.
Which would require more activity on the detour streets. Certainly not advocating that the time shouldn't be moved up, but just wanted to make mention of we would probably be interrupting more traffic than we would from 4 to 7.
Yeah, and so the again, this being sort of a reboot, right? It's a rebirth of this event, and so much feedback is looked for, especially on the flip side, right? The time is set now by the committee, it was set, and things are in motion, and the fire company is going to help with staffing the crossings and the barrier closures, so there's not a full burden on the police department. But please, like, collect all that. Please bring that back on behalf of the EDC and me personally, to don't be shy. Because
Yeah, I also don't know. I don't think it's a real concern. It just makes me think. I don't know what we've done in the past to we've never done any communication to the residents of kind of where the detours lead, but maybe it's just
Can you?
just heightened awareness that, you know, on that day, you might see more traffic coming down your road.
So you know what, are you, so maybe like, if I'm trying to, if they're trying to drive traffic for information to the Facebook page, like maybe put up a map of the closures and suggest it so people can see how they could get around instead of appearing day of and not knowing, something like that.
Yeah, that too, but also just letting, you know, the residents that live on those streets where the detour is, and I don't know if you need to like go door to door or anything like that, it's just maybe highlighting what the detour route is.
Yeah, I'm gonna say, let's drive people to the Facebook page, Trumansburg Winterfest 2021, and let me reach out to the committee and see if they can post with the street closure.
Just because we know that, you know, traffic on village side streets and speeds and everything is definitely always at the top of mind, especially recently. So somebody might be like, why is there all this traffic coming down my road?
Yeah, and also Keith, I think that's great feedback for me to take back to the larger ETC committee about how could we help as that sort of umbrella support organization anytime there's an event that involves anything in the streets to get the information out
That's
to
true,
people.
yeah.
So that's
Very
that's really great. Thank you.
I would recommend that the Winterfest committee or the ETC not suggest detours,
Okay,
but rather once chief and the fire department have established the detours, that we find a way to publicize
just to
that.
publish it. Yeah, great.
Particularly not that I expect a lot of long haul truck drivers check our Facebook page, but we have had issues in the past about what streets trucks get detoured onto because of turning radius. So that's something that police and fire will decide.
They'll decide. Yeah,
And then once we have that established, then certainly we can publicize it as best we can. But since the street is closed at Elm Street,
great.
the tendency is going to be for a lot of people to take a left on Elm. But it may be effective to have some detours start earlier, and that's where police and fire have to make.
We'll make a big choice. Yeah, absolutely. And it's, I mean, the beauty of it is it's not a big detour, right? There's not, you can get around. So yeah, we'll suggest, but we'll just post where the things are and people can look at the map and make their best choices. Great. So I do not have a Clio update other than, I know the meeting is after this one. So, so it hasn't, I don't have anything to add. There's a survey that's for participation and coming out. And so it's continues to be an active community. I think I reported last week about, or we talked about the success with getting the other side of the lake property, which name is escaping me right now. So yeah, I don't have. Thank you, the station property. And the Camp Barton that you mentioned is not Clio related exactly, but they're definitely watching it and had sent in a letter of support for that to be remaining green space. So that's that.
Excellent. Any questions for Jessica?
A little more than 2 minutes on my update. So noted.
EMS youth and street tree, Ben.
I actually don't really have anything to report. The two resolutions that Rorden introduced are really the only things that I've kept up with over the last month. So I'm sort of back to real life a little bit now and just catching up. But I will certainly, I believe there's an EMS report to run that I'll share with everyone. But aside from that, I don't have much of a report this month.
I forgot about a special community event, the birth of a baby Carver. We
That's
forgot
right.
to publicly announce that.
That is, yeah,
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really my update. Abel Robin Carver exists now.
I should include pictures in my report next time as part of community events.
Yes. Actually, no, birth announcements. We could do that. That would be fun.
And no, come on.
But yeah, no real report this month.
Okay. DPW water sewer CBZ.
But I'm sorry, can I ask a question about EMS?
Yeah.
Are we close to posting a job description?
We're going to discuss that.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's the personnel under item 11.
Fantastic, thank you.
All right, on to my section here. We've got, I'll do a run through of some DPW water sewer projects just to keep people up to date. The stormwater project on East Seneca Road and Prospect is nearing or at substantial completion. Roden had mentioned earlier that MRB will be on site on Wednesday for that inspection, and a couple other things that we'll be wandering around the village looking at stormwater related issues. There was, as we all know, quite a bit of flooding in the village, lots of I&I over the last, a week ago, rainstorm that we all experienced. The DPW discovered some sources at the American Legion, so that was a good find there, which is nice to sort out. In general, asking, and I'll try to remember to post this more on the website, but asking homeowners, when we have those really intense rains, to take a look around the property, see if there's any debris that's getting up along the grades. The DPW does do their best to clear in advance of storms and after storms, but obviously if they're kind of ongoing, these things will build up, and it helps everybody, including obviously the homeowner, to have those things cleared out. So, and ask for some help in that regard. Part of the rain issue did cause an overflow event at the sewer plant. I'm told that was clear water that didn't reach the creek. So it could have been a lot worse, but obviously that's still not great. My understanding is the amount of water moving through the sewer plant was close to 2x the amount that it's rated for, which is 8x the amount that we typically see or that we're permitted for. So it was quite a significant event. So it's another thing that MRB will be looking at on Wednesday is checking out the plant and working with the operator so they can fill out a letter to DEC, which is what we have to do every time that happens. So we make sure we're keeping on top of those things. So yeah, lots of stormwater stuff. Otherwise, leaf pickup is in full swing. That's happening through things up until Thanksgiving. Reminder to remove things that are not leaves that could get jammed up in the truck, just to help the guys out. Paving happened today.
Yeah.
So Jess has a very nice new street in front of her
Super
house.
slick. I just almost kept right on going all the way down to the bottom of the way. It felt so good.
Bradley and Halsey were also paved, so they were making fast movements today. I guess the paving company is well behind with all the rain and everything, so they were pushing through pretty hard. But that's all done. I'm imagining there's still follow-up work on anyone's driveway that's out of whack, or if things got too high and they need to fill in some of the side a little bit, but that'll all happen on the DPW's time over the next couple of weeks. As well, the farmer's market tree is coming down probably this week, just to let people know. That will be a unfortunate event, but it really does need to come down for safety reasons. One small final update that's not quite DPW related, but the taking care of T-Bird funding, I looked into the beautification fund at the county level, and that's not going to be re-upped for 2022. So something for us to consider more as we get into budgeting is thoughts and ideas around what we might do if we want to do anything to support taking care of T-Bird. In my mind, seeing them as both helping tourism and in some ways doing a kind of DPW-ish work. And so maybe there's a way to conceive of the resources as far as soil and plants and so forth that go into that. Maybe that makes more of sense to be of a village source, but obviously their volunteer time is really the invaluable piece there. So something to consider as we move into those conversations. On to CPZR, not too much to report, continuing to work on residential zoning. After our conversation last month, we're kind of continuing to look for ways to make better use of the time between our meetings, be more prepared for meetings so they move more quickly, can cover more ground, looking for opportunities to split out into subcommittees as makes sense. So seeing what we can do to move quickly and have something maybe in the beginning of next year to review outside of that committee. And then the farmers market finished up the regular season, and now they have a harvest market scheduled the Monday before Thanksgiving from noon to 3 for all of your Thanksgiving needs. But that's about it for them. So that's my thing.
Could you say when that market is again? Please?
Yeah, it's the Monday before Thanksgiving,
Okay.
which is the 22nd.
Thank you.
Yep.
And it is right there. It's at market.
At Market Space, noon to 3. Yep. they'll have, I don't think all of the regular stalls, but many of them will be there.
Is it called a Thanksgiving market? Is that?
A harvest market, I think
Harvest.
is what they're branding it as. And they'll be
There
pushing
must be
it.
a link, right? Okay.
I'm sure that they'll be pushing it out on their Facebook page and so
I should
forth,
put that on
if
the-
it's not
Village
yet
page.
up there.
Okay.
That's it. for
That was
me.
it?
Yeah, that's it for me.
Any questions for Ben? All right, police, Keith.
Improve my posture here. Starting to slouch. My grandparents more about that.
Yes.
Just a few things to update on the police front. First, the stats for October, 212 calls for service, 5 assists outside of the village, including 2 medical police assists for overdose, traffic complaint on Rabbit Run, motor vehicle assists, premises in the village. Criminal investigations for 2 larceny/theft, a domestic dispute, 5 harassment calls, 3 trespass, 2 fraud. Wanted to say thank you to the department and every other person in the village, DPW, and perhaps fire as well, that assisted with the Halloween street closures. There was noticeably more foot traffic than last year, which was great. And everyone again seems to really enjoy the freedom of the roadways as for pedestrian usage. Certainly the baby strollers cruise a lot better on those roads, and seems to be just a lot more festive. And so who knows in the future, if we ever leave these COVID times, there could be more fun to be had with that luxury. Did hear a couple calls came into the department from residents who did not realize that the streets were going to be closed and expressed some frustration with that. So I think that kind of falls under think about our communications vehicles and how we talk about it nowadays. You know, it's just always hard to get to everybody, you know that, but I'm always open to feedback from fellow board members, the public, etc. If there's a way to help get up front, I think it's 6 streets we close.
Okay.
So maybe canvassing those 6 streets is necessary. Don't want to overreact to a couple of calls. Of course, always a reminder that at least in the Halloween situation, the roads are open to local traffic. So if you have to get up your street to get into your driveway, no one's going to stop you. So just want to put that out there. Lastly, I don't remember everything that's happened, but I think since our last meeting, the LEAPS meeting occurred. I just want to give an update on that. We had our first law enforcement. Yes, our first law enforcement and public safety committee meeting. Thank you to Little Venice for hosting us in their luxurious back room. It's a really great first meeting, I thought, and I'm happy to let Gordon share additional thoughts on that. But just a quick overview, kind of thought in a little over 2 hours, we covered a lot of interesting topics, had a lot of interesting conversation. We talked about deployment of the new body cameras and how and when those are used. We had a really great conversation about some of the webinars Chief Nelson has attended as it pertains to officer mental health and wellness, and how kind of the mental health and wellness of officers obviously has a direct impact on how they're going to engage with the public, especially in high stress situations, and how, you know, he learned some really heartbreaking stories about officers engaging in self-harm, and how that, you know, just plays into the current mentality of officers, and why, you know, part of our plan for reform included things like supporting officer wellness to everyone understands that we've emotionally and physically, mentally healthier officers, they're going to have much better engagement with the public. We talked a lot about breakdown of call volume and call type, and what those, kind of the terminology of the call types, what all those meant, and what are the crimes that are happening locally. We discussed how the county is beginning their discussions and their rollout for collecting demographic data for traffic stops. So that will essentially sounds like each municipality will get to decide if they want to collect, for example, racial identity of the people that are stopped at traffic stops. We talked about a continued search for a second full-time officer and why hiring is challenging right now. I think one stat that really jumped out at everyone, and Warren, correct me if I get this wrong, but we typically have about 300 people take the state police, not the state police, but take the
Civil service exam
civil service
to become a police officer.
for being a police officer. But typically get about 700 or 300 people when that test comes along. And the most recent one had 17.
Oh.
And then you know, each step along the way, you know, how many people pass that test and move on to the academy, whittles away at that, and then how many people actually make it through the academy, whittles that down even more. So to go from 300 at the denominator to 17 kind of shows you where we're at with being able to hire, not just Trumansburg, but everybody being able to hire officers right now. And lastly, I just mentioned, we talked about something that we talked about in the reform process. We talked a lot about the process for how the county communications handles responding to mental health calls. You know, there is a process in place for mental health professionals to be contacted and respond, usually police backup and all that. So they had some great personal stories from people in the committee that were very, here's some great personal anecdotes as to their experience growing up or why they want to be on the committee that will shape the discussion. And lastly, I'll just say that we talked about how, you know, public safety is not just a policeman, right? It's every aspect of village life. I think if your example was, you know, whether it's trees that might fall on you or whatever it is, you know, we talk about areas of the village that are going to make people feel more comfortable engaging with the community as a whole. So law enforcement is just a part of that, but why do you or do you not show up at government meeting? Why would you not run for office? You know, what are those community events where, you know, for one example, where we're lacking diversity, like are people not feeling where it's a safe enough place where they can engage, and how can we improve upon that? So kind of that goes beyond just talking about law, local law. Or if there's anything you want to add, but
No, it covers it well. I think one of my, and I mentioned this to the group that evening, is one of my hopes coming out of the police reform discussion was that the ongoing work can be much more broadly focused than just on policing. I think certainly, I forget who it was, but someone had commented during the police reform process in one of our public meetings about a feeling of safety. And then they weren't in that context, as I recall, they weren't referring to the police officer looking at them sideways. They were referring to a fellow resident looking at them oddly because of their, in that particular instance, of their of their racial background. So that term, public safety, can mean a lot of different things. And I'm particularly sensitive to someone, again, during that public or police reform discussion, said that they had one or two friends who had expressed an interest in the topic, but weren't going to come to a meeting. And it was kind of a feeling of, well, why not? Well, I don't want to. And you can kind of leave that open-ended. I think and we can pick on a lot of different situations, but just kind of in the current world in which we live, it takes a certain amount of something to go to a public meeting and stand up and speak, or get on a Zoom call, basically to put yourself out there, so to speak, and say something, particularly if you are, particularly if you have a concern or criticism in particular. It opens you, rightly or wrongly, it can make someone feel as if they could potentially become a target of others. And so one of my hopes for this committee is, it is a small group. I don't want it to get unwieldy, but it's also not like the CPZR where you're signing up for a 3-year stint. It can be something where folks come and go. They can come to a few meetings if they have an issue that they don't feel comfortable coming to a village board meeting or emailing me directly about. They can come in a hopefully a feeling of a safer setting, because it's informal, because there are other residents there, because we're discussing a whole manner of things. So we'll see. The plan is to meet quarterly. I've only had one additional person so far express interest in sitting on the committee, so we'll go from there. But I am hopeful that it can be yet another conduit where residents can communicate with this board or be put in touch with whoever they need to be put in touch with to address their particular concern as residents, because I think that's important. And hey, 50 years, but not even 50. Pre-social media, really. 15 to 20 years ago, if you had an issue, you didn't have a problem picking up the phone and making a phone call, or coming to a meeting and saying, hey, this is a problem, please help me. I think that's really changed, and not for the better. So in as much as we can make that available to folks, I think will be a good thing. So.
Along those lines, I want to say one thing, and then something else occurred to me that I'm also going to say. But one is that the more community events that we do have that are like trick or treating, and there's two things that are coming to in Winterfest, the more that you are not an anonymous member of your community, but you're seeing the people who own that home and you're interacting with them, especially in a benevolent way. Well, it might be an inconvenience for your motorized life at that time. Like, it's a huge safety building experience for our communities. And so thankful for that aspect. And then the other is like for the committee to consider, and I'm sure you'll get there because this is a brand new concept, but like, can you have open forums where people feel comfortable to come, but they might not? And that's a really good point. What about the old fashioned suggestion box? Is there a way that people could anonymously ask their questions? Is there a form that we'd like to have, an anonymous question form? And obviously, you don't have to, like on the web page, but you let people know it's there. We've found it. I'm surprised because, I'll say anything anywhere almost. And my organization where I work, we're all come to this meeting, but people don't talk, but they did start using the anonymous question form as soon as they felt like their name was not part of it, and lots of really great questions started to get asked. So that's that. I think it's great work, you guys. Appreciate
Put
it.
it right by the old medication box.
I mean, I don't know, right? Because that's way
Bring your
both.
meds, bring your questions.
Well, it's bringing both areas of the. If you're in a digital platform and you have a question and you want to submit it, and you know that the people are going to look at it, but if you're not digital, like, and you want to drop a letter. Because if you made a phone call, you could make an anonymous phone call back in the day, right? You didn't have to give your name.
No, I think it's a good point. Again, I think to reiterate, it's laid out. I kind of mentioned diversity, but really it could be a number of things. I mean, we know that, for example, during the South Street discussion, there were people that were scared to come to meetings.
Right.
And maybe be a minority voice, whatever opinion that might have been. Or, or yeah, come to planning board meetings or, and, be on one of those committees, right? Because people on those committees weren't always treated nice. And so how do we make people feel more comfortable that they can come express their opinion? There's people that won't even post in Trumansburg community Facebook groups because of
Sure.
the backlash they might get from people. So all of those things that play into, we don't, ideally, we don't want anyone feeling like they can't engage in any of those opportunities, right? There's a lot of different reasons for why, it will probably take us a while to fill that ZBA position, but we definitely don't want one of them to be because you're worried about
Yeah,
what people are going to say about you and say to you and do. Definitely impacts a wide range of areas of the rest of those and governance.
Is that it for police?
Will yield my time.
Treasurer, Vicky.
Hi. So last week we finished up the 2021 audit. They said it went really, really well. So you should see the report, maybe the January meeting, but definitely the February meeting. So now I'm going to start working on budgets. Just new formatting, so it's a little easier to understand, and hopefully have them ready to go by the 1st of January, in case you want to get started early. I have been helping Cynthia Menino navigate how the village pays bills with us helping Winterfest and taking in their donations. So, and Jess is in on all of those emails that go to Cynthia. We did a little changing of the office. And that is, it's a fairly quieter time of year in the office.
Okay. Any questions or comments for Vicky?
thanks for your help, Vicki.
Oh, not a problem anytime. That's what we're here for.
Oh, I heard that.
We're here to serve and support. I do have an official retirement date of February 28th.
Oh,
I've talked to Warden about this, which is I think it's a Sunday. So I have to literally skip a day and I'll be back. I've talked to Warden. I'm going to work full days Tuesday, Wednesday, and a half a day on Thursday.
okay.
So, but I'll always answer emails, and if you need something, I'm here.
Yeah.
So, but other than that, once the audit's over, which those are those boxes behind you. It's kind of time to clean up and get some stuff done.
All right, thanks, Vicky.
Sure.
Tammy's been excused for the remainder of the meeting, which takes us to item number 8 on the agenda, old business. So we have the finalization of our EAF review following our public hearing on part 2.
It's in there, right?
Right, so we have part 2 in here. Last time around, we had talked through the kind of headings of each. I guess I'll kind of open it up to ideas if anyone has on how we'd like to go through it. I could see us walking through each one individually and kind of answering the yes, no. I do think we've talked a number of times at this point saying how, because the comp plan doesn't actually imply any one specific action, this is kind of an interesting type of a review and typically finds no's across the board, but we can walk through it in more detail.
We did actually read.
We read through every,
We read through the headings.
Yeah, we read through the headings. There's another little sentence there if we want to say, kind of a little bit more detail. We can also, I guess I'm kind of wondering how much people want to deeper dive in this form, or if people have kind of looked through on their own, and we can kind of go a little more quickly, trying to kind of judge where people are at.
I mean, I've looked through it and I have no further input than what is already checked for the boxes of no, so.
I'll keep as a comment, I'm comfortable with it simply because we did determine that the answers were no to each.
Right.
If there was anything that was close, obviously when it comes to zoning, when that time comes, we'll crawl through it with a fine tooth comb because that actually has legislative authority. But I'm okay with it as is and as reviewed in the public hearing.
All right. So then the one other thing I would draw our attention to is I added a part 3 in the Dropbox, which is a blank part 3, but just to give folks a sense of what our next step is here. As Gordon mentioned, we're kind of going to entertain the idea of talking about the adoption of the comp plan in our December meeting. That will go hand in hand with making a final determination. Now, having gone through this part 2 and said no to everything, that kind of draws our conclusion pretty clearly towards a negative declaration. But that's what part 3 is actually signing off on and saying, here is our declaration, either negative or positive, and then our reasons therefore. And so seeing as we're leaning towards the negative, I can work with EDR to have a stronger list of, exactly what we've gone through the process, the things we've seen, pull from the comp plan, and we kind of have a stronger reasoning behind that. But I think we're all kind of leaning in that direction, but just so we see where we're going, and I'll have a filled in version of this with reasonings that we can all review for our next meeting.
So what I'd like to do is at the top of our meeting, similar to our public hearing tonight, at the top of our meeting in December, is do the secret determination. Assuming that we adopt a negative declaration, then move on to consideration of the draft comp plan, unless something changes in it between now and then.
Yeah. And just a little detail there, the resolution that I've been starting to work through with Guy towards that effect, because we're kind of moving in that direction, is going to be one massive joint resolution for both our declaration and our adoption. So it'll kind of be a joint thing at the end there, but we can kind of go through them in sequence and have one resolution at the end there.
Great.
If possible, I'd like to have that document available. Our meeting again.
The 13th. Listen, just making that up. It's the
If we can have that, again, assuming nothing changes in the comp plan draft itself, if we could have that by what do you think, December 3rd,
Yeah.
we have a full 10 days,
Yeah,
And 2
I don't.
weekends.
so it's available for review.
Yeah, I don't foresee a problem with that. We're in a pretty good spot with moving these things along, so I don't think that should be a difficult thing to do. I think we might be able to get even sooner than that. And I'll just add, that'll be, in my mind, that'll be that resolution, the part 3 filled out with the details, and the final comp plan, and I can circulate all those. And we can post them as well, I imagine. Okay, for people to see. I feel like there's one other thing I was gonna say. Oh, just as far as the comp plan, and maybe we can wait till Jess goes back, but it might be worth, and I thought about this late, so I would have added to the agenda, but taking a moment for us to consider if there's anything we heard tonight that would cause us to want to make any additions. Just so we can have that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, So I guess I'll just throw in what we heard tonight, plus some of the email input we got over the last few days. For Jessica.
Yeah.
Take a brief interlude. Grab some water. The dead air will this audience.
I will say as an aside, Kathy, who was joining earlier, did mention to me during the meeting that she knew of at least a couple other people that are watching on on YouTube as well. So
Excellent.
I checked that and we had around, usually on average of 4 people watching throughout the whole thing. So we had a few more than just on the Zoom.
So we were waiting for you.
Apologies.
No problem. The question was, have we heard anything that would suggest we make a change? A substantive change to the comp plan based on what we heard tonight. And I was just going to respond that combining what we heard tonight along with some comments we got via email, some of which were certainly valuable comments. I'm always hesitant to, or I'm aware of not wanting to make perfect the enemy of good. So
Sure.
it's certainly easy to say that something isn't perfect. But that's why the state wants comp plans reviewed every 5 years. It's supposed to be, it's not supposed to take 3 years to adopt a comp plan.
Right.
It's supposed to be something that is reviewed regularly and changed as often as the community's needs suggest. A couple of things I heard that do kind of do feel important is obviously the stormwater management, the kind of village-based project type things that we know are important, all of which really are bolstered by having a comp plan that mentions them, rather than wanting those other things in place before we have a comp plan that's adjusted. And the other things that I think are both, and I'm thinking about one email in particular, as well as some comments tonight that address process with respect to zoning is actually the next step. How clean is the zoning document? How airtight is it? How much room is there for a gray area interpretation? All of that stuff comes down to which is why zoning documents go from 50 pages to 500 pages, is just to really try to eliminate as much of that as possible. So I haven't heard anything. It's a long way of saying I haven't heard anything that would want me to delay an already lengthy process. If anything, it tells me we're at the point where an adoption of the comp plan moves us to the next step, which includes some things that do need addressing and have needed addressing, but can't be addressed until we have an adopted revised comp plan. That's my 2.5 cents.
Yeah, I'm in complete accord with that. I think that I'm so grateful that people did comment that it is now on public record, the things that need to be addressed during the zoning review. I feel like that is what really came from me, as you just basically stated.
Anything additional? Ben Carver, anything additional?
I don't really have anything to add. Aside from, I did want to echo quickly, I believe it was Don who, as part of his email and, over the years has also said this, just the importance of parking, I think is something. And I do think, it's one of those, I wish it was as easy as things, but I do want to just sort of give a quick shout out to that and the importance of that issue. It's something that is on my mind and was on my mind while we were reviewing the plan. So hopefully when we, it's yet another thing that as we get into the zoning, it'll come back. But I think that's all I have to contribute to that.
All right.
Good. So we'll plan on that for December. Again, unless we hear something earth shattering in the meantime, that gives us pause to pause. Second item under old business is a several times delayed stretch code discussion. I don't know, Ben Carver, if there's anything in particular we want to kick this off with. You know, are we still in the theoretical with zoning revision looming, or how we want to approach this part of the conversation?
So I'll be honest, I was surprised when I saw this on the agenda. I am not at all prepared for this conversation. See previous reference to new baby and me having checked out for the last month. I will say, and I would have to sort of brush up on what the stretch code is and what it would mean again before we had this conversation. But I think really what needs to happen is I need to send those things out so that you all can review them in the meantime, because it is, I think to me, it's a fairly obvious yes. I don't really see any need to wait for the comp plan or to wait to get any other ducks in a row. And I would very much like to have it passed, but it's a fairly complex thing that I think it would help to review beforehand. So if anyone had specific questions, if anyone has read up on it, I could see if memory serves, but yeah, I'm not at all prepared to have a sort of brief overview kind of bullet pointed conversation right now, or at least not, to give that kind of presentation.
I guess my only questions would be when you're preparing that is, I'm aware that large development, the large development of 46 South, their plans already include the renewable energy mandates that are part of stretch code. I guess because it is complex, I would just be curious, do any parts of the code, would it make what I'll call simple home renovation and or repair either cost prohibitive or unnecessarily burdensome on residents? I just want to see what's involved in some of those pieces that I haven't looked into closely. So anything you can prepare on those kinds of details would be helpful.
Yeah, we can. That's fairly easy. So NYSERDA, who put the stretch code together, has prepared, broad overview type quantitative analysis of those things. And Tom also looked at it with an eye towards the more local stuff. And yeah, I will absolutely share those.
Okay. Good. Anything else on that? Any other items of old business that need to be addressed that I haven't listed? New business. I don't know if any of you are familiar with sister cities. Don't know, shout out once.
As a concept in general in the world, yes.
Sister Cities International is an organization which has been around for many decades. I think the village actually tentatively took on a sister city many years ago and never really followed through. I was contacted by a gentleman who lives in Ithaca, who is very active in the Sister Cities International organization, who is wondering whether the village of Trumansburg, and this is going to fall squarely in TC, whether the village of Trumansburg would be interested in being a sister city for a mostly similar sized community in Nepal by the name of Kisbang. They are a suburb of a larger area. They have, I'm just looking at my notes, they have their own tourism efforts. Nepal in general needs to increase their tourism exposure. They're a very quickly growing middle class that travels. And so it's kind of a nebulous idea of what sister cities can be. It's very much a what you make of it kind of concept.
Yeah.
How much back and forth do you try to involve your school districts and your school age children? Is it 21st century version of pen pal type thing, as well as he right now, the gentleman I spoke with, is over there in Nepal with a group that went to visit. Do we help to coordinate annual or biannual visits of groups of people from each community to go back and forth and do everything from share best practices on agriculture and tourism. We live in wine country. They have their own They have their own medicinal products of various types that they grow over there. As that expands in its legality in New York State, you know, is there going to be a place in his mind, and he was very forthright about this. Are we going to see marijuana tourism the way we see wine country tourism? Is that going to become a thing at some point? So very open-ended, very potentially informal, but with the hope that it becomes something that can include projects and initiatives and whatnot. So I bring it to this board to see, A, do we have the bandwidth, literally and figuratively, to talk about these kinds of things? If we do, it's probably easy fit for ETC in terms of concept. We don't have to go into it with a lot of concrete ideas. If, however, we feel that there's just too much on our plate at the moment, then I would certainly have no problem indicating that we're very interested, but just can't take on any more at this time. Please come back in a couple of years. But also, there's really no, I don't think there's any loss except for whatever time that's put into it. If we give it a shot and nothing materializes or develops. So, thoughts?
I always talk first. Keep in.
I'm very intrigued by this. And though it's something that may fall into tourism, I would be happy to play an active role in thinking about how to make this work. A lot of ideas kind of pop in my head already. That don't necessarily require people to actually travel between the two places, because that's going to be a select few probably can, but yeah, I think it's a really cool concept. I think it's even more fascinating in a world where we all got pushed into the Zoom universe faster than we probably would have previously, and it's commonplace. Schools are built for video conferencing now. Every classroom has a smart board, so the idea that you could get, I mean, I don't know what the infrastructure is like in this town necessarily, but that's to be investigated, I guess. But I think it's pretty cool. And I don't, how does it work? I mean, in terms of, does anyone know how long you maintain your sister city relationship? Can you, is it a year thing, 2 years? Can you?
Sounds like it's open-ended. The relationship will last as long as both parties feel it's beneficial.
I mean, I don't want to break up with anybody, that's awkward, but I could see it becoming a fun local thing where maybe, every 2-3 years, you pick a new city.
When you can have more than one sister city.
But you can.
You mentioned that there are some places that have multiple sister cities, where there's a feeling of some commonalities between the two.
Well, I'm assuming the village would send me to Nepal to investigate further, and I'm happy to accept it. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's cool. I think it's.
I thought you were going to say the village would buy you a one-way ticket.
And I'd be happy to help work on something.
Interesting.
And Ben,
I am very happy to support other people doing this work. This is not my personal calling. I'm not opposed to it in any way. It doesn't inspire me the same way. But if other people are supportive of it and want to put in the time, I think it's a wonderful idea. I have a fun fact because I was just Googling Nepal as we're going. Their time zone is 5 hours and 45 minutes ahead of GMT right now.
just
As someone who has to deal with time zones in computers in their day job, that you're
Yeah, that's gonna mean getting together is gonna be.
Pick an
really
hour.
easy.
just pick a damn out. But that doesn't mean that they aren't lovely people. And we can hang out with them and engage with them. So
What was the name of the town again?
Kispang, Kispang, I believe.
Carver?
I mean, I will very much reiterate what Ben Darfler just said. I will also say that we do have a sister city. It wasn't that long ago, maybe 6 years or so, something along those lines that we did. And I don't even, I think it's a statement of like the amount of energy required from our board to keep it up that I don't even know who our sister city is or when. It sounds like maybe Vicky does remember.
I think it's in Switzerland. And Gordon, if you want, I can look back at emails from Marty about that. And it was probably 4 years ago, maybe.
Oh, geez, yeah.
Longer than that. Yeah, see if you can find it.
Okay. Okay.
So you don't
But I
have to-
think it's in Switzerland.
There's also the gentleman I spoke with. He indicated that there were sister cities programs that weren't official sister cities programs. I don't know if this one from previous is or was or wasn't. I don't know. But I think it's worth following up to find out who this was from previous years. And then
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a mechanism through the ETC committee to be able to, and I think that committee has bandwidth to certainly speak to this individual. I think that we would want to welcome him to come after Winterfest to say what his intentions are and explain a little bit more. If this is the Sister Cities International that's on the website that was founded by Dwight D. Eisenhower in 1956. Growing up as a kid in Maine, we had Osaka. I think Osaka, Japan was our sister city. So there was an impact in the educational thing. We did stuff as a result. And I think like anything else, there's what you put into it is what you get out of it. But especially if there's community interest, like if other people, not just the board, is interested in using this resource, there's a fee. It's $190 annually for a village of our size, which seems maybe nominal. So why don't we put him in touch with me and have him speak to us? I think it also, I should say, like, if we're really talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion and wanting to look at people not as ourselves, I mean, looking globally seems like a good opportunity to do that.
I did have that thought in regards to a school sort of program potentially.
Yeah.
I think, I want to say in middle school, we had one with some area in Russia and we sent
Yeah.
letters back and forth. So I think that was the one part that kind of intrigued me the most, to think of what we were talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, worth exploring. Put us in
when he
touch.
gets back from Nepal, I'll send that good email.
Secretly wondering if it makes more sense to have a sister city in like Louisiana within our own country, but maybe that's something else to explore.
Well, this sister cities international.
I know, but that whole notion of like,
Some people would consider Louisiana international.
so
Might be lower.
we'll
on
put
the-
that, we'll put that one on the deeper ETC list.
Okay. Might be lower on the diversity and inclusion side.
Is it?
Just gonna bring that one up.
Okay.
Okay, then I will follow up with him and include you, and we'll go from there.
Great.
Second public comment period, which would leave just Mary or Ann, if there's anything that you'd like to chime in on before we move into executive session.
No, I'm good.
Me too. Have a good session.
All right, thank you both. Then I would entertain a motion to go into executive session to discuss personnel.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, give me a moment to stop the recording.
Well done us for getting here at 9:15. Don't screw it